So we'll officially get started. So thank you all for taking the time to log in and join. I'll go through the introduction, and then hopefully by the time I've finished, any late arrivals will be with us, and they can join and listen to perhaps the more pertinent sections of the presentation. So from our side now, we're going to get on. We're going to work through for the next hour. So I'll get started. I'm Martin Jardine. I'm the Director of Agri-Food at Grŵp Cymdeithasol and Chair of the Môn Larder. Absolutely delighted to be here today to host the latest Môn Larder webinar. So we've done a few of these now, and today's is on the social value and the supply chain, food supply chain. So our last webinar hopefully helped provide an overview of how public procurement works in relation to food and drink, where we discussed some of the requirements and opportunities for businesses. So certainly for today and over the next hour, we'll provide an overview of social value requirements in public procurement, and we'll share a specific way of measuring social value for food and drink SMEs, which will enable hopefully you as suppliers and those of you in procurement to better prepare for public sector opportunities. So just in short, really, the public sector in Wales spends an estimated £90 million a year on food and drink, and there's a greater emphasis on demonstrating and measuring social value in the supply chain when contracts are being awarded to manufacturers. And that's whether they're direct awards or whether they're through wholesalers or distributors to supply into schools, colleges, hospitals, prisons and local authorities. So you can see it's a massive opportunity, and anything that we can do to support SMEs in accessing and winning those contracts has to be a good thing for Wales. So whether or not your projects are done through wholesalers or consolidators, being able to measure and demonstrate social value is a really important and impactful part of how tenders are being appraised currently and certainly going forward in the future. So I'm sure that most of you by now will be familiar with Zoom and web-based tech that we've been using for what feels like eternity. But I'd encourage you to use the question and answer function. So it's the chat function we're looking at today, really, if you have any observations or questions. So we've got people fielding those questions, and I will chair the Q&A side of that through the panel as we go. So please do put your questions in there. Mae cyflwyniadau heddiw yn Saesneg, ond mae'n anodd I gyfrannu yn pa bynnag iaith i'ch hoffech. So os ti eisiau defnyddio Cymraeg yn y chat, defnyddio fo, mae'n fyny chi. Da ni yn da Cymraeg, a da ni'n I gyd yn trio ateb yn y iaith Cymraeg hefyd. So just for everyone's information, today's meeting is being recorded. So just hopefully you're comfortable with that, and that will allow us then to share the event with a broader audience from our website. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Môn Larder, it's a group really that's focused on supporting, preparing, enabling suppliers to access public sector opportunities. And I think that's what we're looking really is to try and facilitate collaborative links between buyers, suppliers and other key stakeholders. And we've had a good representation at the series of meetings we have. I would appeal to you that if you have any colleagues that you think this event might be of use, please ask them to visit the Môn Larder and website and download it, but also encourage them to be part of the dialogue, because I think the more people that are engaged and are talking about this, we'll have a much stronger chance of moving it all forward. Okay, let's get started then. So we'll be starting our presentations with Luke Prosser from Bangor University, who will provide us with an insight into the importance of social value in public sector procurement. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about Luke so as you can set the scene really. So Luke is a PhD researcher at Bangor University. He's studying how localised food and drink supply chains can provide sustainable food futures for Wales. It's a very interesting element of research, and I think you'll find it very interesting. So he's recently published research on food producer collaborations in response to COVID-19 and agricultural systems, and he's working to demonstrate how locally procured food can help public organisations in Wales to meet the future wellbeing goals. His research is funded by CES2 in partnership with Mentor Môn, and he's also a committee member of the Royal Geographical Society's Food Geographies Research Group and a member of Adnodd Research Group at Bangor University. So Luke, if you're comfortable, I will now hand over to you for you to go through your presentation. What we'd plan to do really is run through to We've got 3 presentations, and we'll run through them, and we'll wind up with a little bit of Q&A towards the end at 10:50, but we'll pick up questions as we go after this presentation. So Luke, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin, and good morning, everyone. As Martin said, I'm Luke Prosser, a researcher at Bangor University, and yeah, I'm exploring the future of sustainable food and drink supply chains for Wales. So, as I guess a little starter, the social value, at least as far as I'm going to be talking about it today, is really the wider value that decisions and financial decisions made by any organisation have on the wider community or the nation even. So that's really sort of the stance from which I'm looking at this today. So why is social value important in public procurement? Well, I guess in the first instance, and most simply, it's a legal requirement, definitely here in Wales. The legal emphasis comes from 2 different places, depending on the organisation that perhaps you're supplying or working for. If it's a non-devolved public body, then the Public Services Act of 2013 is effective in England and Wales, or for devolved powers, so anything that is dealt with by Welsh Government, the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, implemented in 2015, which requires public bodies in Wales to think about the long-term impact of their decisions, to work better with people, communities, and each other, and to prevent persistent problems such as poverty, health inequalities, and climate change. And really, these two acts, they encompass social value. The England and Wales policy specifically names social value. The Wellbeing and Future Generations Act it's really at the core is social value, but it's maybe not quite so explicitly named. But for today's presentation, we're really going to focus on the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, which was implemented, as I said, in 2015. So that's the short answer, but in reality, the story is much more complex than that. There is significant societal change demanding a move towards increasingly sustainable production and consumption. We've seen that change really grow in the last few years in the UK. And then events such as Brexit and the global pandemic that we're currently dealing with have highlighted and exacerbated the fragility of international just-in-time supply chains. And then the knock-on and long-lasting effect of these on the national economy will mean that we need to maximise the value of return on public spending, which in Wales on food and drink is estimated to be somewhere in the region of £90 million a year. So it really is a significant spend, and the level of multiplier effect that we can see on that when spent locally could be really significant to the response to both Brexit and COVID. So what I want to do now is really dive into the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. I'm not going to dwell too much on the policy itself, but rather I want to look at some of the ways that local food can help meet these goals. So I know we have a wide range of people here today, but I'm hoping that there'll be some food for thought, whatever your perspective is. If you're from a procurement background, then hopefully this will highlight some of the deliverables that local food might provide when it comes to your organisation reporting on the goals. Or if you're from a food production or supply perspective, hopefully this will present you with some of the ways that your local product may represent better value over a non-local alternative. It's also important, I think, to say that nothing that I'm particularly going to say here is necessarily particularly groundbreaking. It's likely a lot of the things that I'm going to cover here are things that you're probably already doing. But a lot of it comes down to communication and measuring it, as Priest is going to talk about later. But hopefully there are also new things here, whatever your perspective, and hopefully we can look at implementing these things to maximise social value. So the Act itself aims to improve the economic, social, environmental and cultural well-being of Wales, and it mandates that every public body must work towards this and report their objectives and their progress annually. It does this by encouraging organisations to implement 5 ways of working, which are to collaborate, to look long term, to integrate their thinking and their processes, to involve people, and to look to prevent issues. And I think these 5 ways of working really highlight how easy it is for food to play a significant part in this. I think the food sector already works like this in a lot of cases, and looking locally, it's much easier to implement these 5 ways of working. So then after the 5 ways of working, there are 7 goals. So a prosperous Wales, a resilient Wales, a healthier Wales, a more equal Wales, a Wales of cohesive communities, a Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language, and a globally responsible Wales. And I'm sure that this isn't new to most people. Hopefully people have seen or been aware of this before, but hopefully we're going to dive now into some more depth and see where food can deliver on these goals. So the first goal of a prosperous Wales, this is a Wales that is environmentally conscious, has a skilled population and a strong and stable economy. And local food is key to this, or it can be key to this. If we grow the food, if we use the food, that we grow locally, we can reduce our carbon impact, we can reduce food miles, we can definitely create and sustain jobs, both in the core production, but also in the broader supply chain. And we can encourage the development of a skilled labour force, all of which will contribute to developing a more prosperous Wales. A resilient Wales, this is a Wales that is adaptable and able to absorb and mitigate shocks and maintains the natural environment. It's important to see food producers and farmers especially, not just for the product that they grow or produce, they also act significantly as land managers. They manage the environment that we all live in and most of us enjoy. Local food also means that we're not so reliant on imports. We've seen as a result of COVID-19 and because of Brexit that it's not always necessarily a given that food will be able to get through our borders and onto our supermarket shelves when needed. And the same goes for food for public procurement. We cannot rely necessarily on imported food. There's a risk when you import food from abroad with extended supply chains that there is opportunity amongst there for food scandals, as we've seen with things like horse meat. And then by purchasing local food, we're also stimulating a circular economy, which again is protected from outside shocks. So a healthier Wales then, a Wales which maximises well-being and encourages healthy decision-making. Again, we have more traceable food chains. We know what is in our food to a better degree at least, and we have better control over our diets because we can work closely with our producers, we can work closely with the places that we're supplying, and we can control the food that is ending up on our plates. And again, if we're consuming the food that is locally produced, it's much more easy to educate the next generation about where their food is coming from and how to make better, healthy choices. A more equal Wales then, an inclusive Wales, regardless of background or circumstances. So an equal Wales is a Wales that shares its wealth across the country. Traditionally, rural areas, the main food production areas of Wales tend to be the areas with lower incomes, lower levels of wealth. And that doesn't generate an equal Wales. So if we can stimulate these areas by buying the produce that they are creating, we can increase the wealth. We can go back to a more circular economy model, and we can generate wealth in those areas. We're also able to provide higher quality, more nutritious food to those that are vulnerable, especially if we're thinking about supplying into like the healthcare sectors. We can get higher quality food into hospitals and places like that by buying local, by knowing what we're getting, and by having that social value as a justification, if that means that the price perhaps is higher. We would not be supporting production processes that maybe don't meet the standards that we might come to expect in the UK. We have very high food production standards, and that is not necessarily replicated globally. And then we also generate employment and training opportunities from across the country. Wales then of cohesive communities is where the communities, especially in our rural areas, are viable and attractive long term. And we've seen over the last few decades a mass migration really from rural to urban areas. And this is because these communities are no longer that attractive to younger generations. They're no longer that financially stable because of the decline of the industry in these areas. And if we can make a commitment as public bodies to buy more of this produce, then we can give a long-term stability to these communities. We also generate employment and training opportunities, and again, we come back to that circular economy. Then a Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language. Traditionally, these farming communities especially here in North Wales, are Welsh language strongholds. And this can be lost if we lose the next generation of people, perhaps across the border into England, or even into more urban areas where the language is perhaps less prevalent. By supporting our farming communities, we also support the management of land for all users, not just for food production, but also for use, for enjoyment, for outdoor recreation. And we maintain the tradition that we have of farming in Wales. And then finally, we have a globally responsible Wales. This is a Wales that considers the impact globally of decisions that we make here in Wales. And that can be things like reducing our food miles, reducing the emissions that we emit that affect the whole globe, not just us here in Wales. Again, it can be not supporting production processes that fall short of the standards that we might expect. And it also potentially prevents the exploitation of scarce resources globally. If we can maximize the available resources that we have in this country, it can minimize the impact of over-exploitation in other parts of the world. So finally then, I think I just want to leave you with this little diagram, which really highlights the 20 or so opportunities that I've rattled through here. And what I really want you to see is that by picking just a few of these deliverables, you really can meet a broad range of these goals. And in turn, provide significant social value, both to your organisation or your company, but also to Wales as a broader perspective. So diolch yn fawr, thank you for listening. And I'll back to Martin now.
Thank you very much for that, Luke. It's really, really useful summary of the Future Generations Act. And I think, looking ahead, these things will become more and more important, particularly when it comes to criteria for assessing and scoring. But I wouldn't see this as something overly onerous, because we work with lots of food businesses, and a lot of this, if you like, the good practice that already exists within the sector can be noted against the Future Generations Act and teased out. So, just giving you an example, Vibrant Culture of Wales. I mean, we've got many fully bilingual brands in Wales that represent the language and the culture really, really well. And I guess, it's how we link those things across so they become, if you like, a selling tool for the business and selling tool for Wales. Similarly, if you look at those of you who adopt using local produce, the knock-on supply chain benefits there, will help with a thriving and prosperous Wales, creation of new jobs. So I think there's lots of things in there where businesses are already innovating and coming up with healthier alternatives, which could, really resonate with a healthier Wales and, and lots of the practices around sustainability. So I think there's things there that on a practical level could be worked at to respond really, really well. So there's no questions in the chat. So we'll move ahead with our next presentation. So Luke, thank you for that. It's really, really useful. And I think it's one of those presentations that people will enjoy reflecting on and looking at the download of the slides. Okay, so the next person I'm going to introduce is Prys. Prys is the social value lead for Wales at the Social Value Portal. Prys has over 25 years commercial and strategic management experience in business process outsourcing sector and a strong background in mergers and acquisitions. His recent change of career has seen him return to Wales to drive the social value message, and he's passionate about his role to deliver environmental, social, economic and cultural contributions to local communities in Wales. He's also proud to be able to utilise the Welsh language in a business context for the first time. So I'll hand over to Prys. If you're comfortable, Prys, you can pick it up from there.
Diolch, Martin. Just wanted to check you can see my screen.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yep, perfect. So, bore da, good morning, everyone. Dwi wrth fy modd I fod yma heddi. Been kindly invited to share with you some background on social value. And I have to say, I'm really excited to also further explore the opportunities that can present within the food sector in Wales. Why? Well, actually, Luke touched on it. I firmly believe that the food sector has a direct correlation and impact on health and certainly patient outcomes, as well as also how it should have an outcome on decision-making within public body procurement, but also probably a step further within private sector buying decisions in Wales. Here comes the technology. So just to give you a quick overview of social value, the good news, I think, is that every organisation is delivering on social value. The question really to ask is, are we managing it? Are we measuring it? And are we actually reporting it? I think the key really for me is the bottom slide here. Imagine a world if we actually stopped doing what we did today, and what would society look like? Therefore, if we did stop doing that, I firmly believe that all of your organisations would stop delivering social value. And the social value element of that is the quantification of the benefit that your business delivers to society. And in our opinion, as an organisation, that's economical, that's environmental, that's social, but specifically in Wales, that's also cultural. Just to put it into a political context, again, Luke has touched upon this. The Public Service Act in England and Wales in 2012 was launched. It was great that it was launched. However, it has no comparison whatsoever, in my opinion, with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act in Wales. What that has done has required all public bodies to report against all of the 7 goals that have been developed. And to me, that gives a great opportunity for all organisations to highlight how they are delivering on social value, and also probably put some more pressure on public bodies in Wales to look at local organisations in their buying decision making. What it also has done, certainly in the last 12 to 18 months, or however long we've been locked in, has increased the decision making around the hyper local element of the buying decision. So for those organisations who are currently embedding social value, they are receiving clear benefits. Now, the key benefits that we are seeing as an organisation is they are delivering better value for money for the public pound. And the importance here is that public pound is staying in Wales. Key is the increasing the local spend, and I will show you some data that we've got through our organisation to highlight how this works. But also what it does, it rewards organisations that are local within that particular supply chain. Clearly, what it does is develops local communities and opportunities for disadvantaged people within the locality, and promotes that angle of social mobility. And key to what Luke was talking about earlier on, it does promote a responsible supply chain, which all in all leads to a cleaner, greener environment. And key to myself is looking at that place-based community social value, which delivers more resilient communities as a result of those activities. Now, hopefully some of you, if not all of you, would have heard of the National TOMS for Wales. TOMS stands for Themes, Outcomes and Measures. This was a framework and methodology that was put in place specifically for Wales on the back of learnings that had been developed with public bodies in England for the last 4 or 5 years. How this was put together, a national task force for Wales was put in place. We as an organisation helped drive this through the WLGA, Welsh Government, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Office, and a number of members within public bodies in Wales to drive that framework and methodology. Now, my question in this forum would be, why aren't there any food sector representatives within that task force? I've already talked about that as a planning feature for this particular meeting, and I'd like to take that away to add at least one person within the task force to help look at how we develop the framework to be more specific to the food sector in Wales, but also in England. What the National Task Force in Wales did do was identify the two great frameworks that were in place, i.e. the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act and also the Community Benefits Programme. What was clear was that there was a gap in the measurement and reporting against all of those themes and goals. So what the TOMS framework has done is try to eliminate those gaps to ensure that there is clear, consistent reporting against all of those themes and goals in Wales. And what it does do is allow us to analyse all data around social value and start to report on what good looks like around certain sets of data around employing people, volunteering hours, food bank donations, all of those kind of elements within the social value world. So very, very briefly about what we do. As an organisation, we measure, manage and report social value activities against all elements of reporting and goods and services purchasing within your organisation. Now, what I would say, first of all, on that, and I think Myrddin may have a link that he can share with you. We have developed the TOMS framework with our partners in the task force to try and offer a consistent framework of measurement across all sectors and public bodies and private organisations in Wales. Part of that solution is a free to use calculator. I think it's been downloaded 15,000 times. Essentially, it is quite a hefty spreadsheet where any organisation can log on to our portal or the WLGA portal website and download the calculator. And in effect, what you can do is plot your social value activities, whether it be volunteering hours, for example. You can put in a unit of measure and it will provide you in pounds and pence a financial consideration of your social value activity within certain criteria. As an organisation, what we do also take that a step further and provide a digitised portal of social value activity. And on the back of that, that would provide significant amount of reporting against supplier activity, management and measurement of ITT work within the procurement function. What that would also do is take the procurement function a step further so that we could manage the contract management of that particular social value activity through the supplier function, and also crucially, not only manage the data, but also ensure that the evidence against that activity is provided as well. Just to give you a flavour of what the data that we can provide and we can report on. I mentioned earlier that we can start to look at the landscape and understand what good looks like. So within our digitised portal, so this doesn't include the free to use calculator because that is used by an organisation on their own, and therefore we don't get access to that data. However, the digitised portal, we have to date put nearly 3,000 projects through the portal. That's a procurement project, which equates to a value of nearly £23 billion worth of contracts. And what that does do with regards to understanding what good looks like, it gives us a number of figures that we can highlight as part of that process. So as you can see there, £3.7 billion worth of local economic value has been delivered as part of the 28 billion contracts. So in essence, what it shows, and an extremely powerful figure for you as an organisation to demonstrate to organisations as you're going through your ITTs, through case studies, through annual reporting, for trying to get funding for activities, for example. So for every pound within the portal that has gone through for that £22.7 billion worth of procurement activity, 20 pence worth has gone back, over 20 pence worth has gone back into the local communities as local economic and social value on the projects. So hopefully you'd agree that's a mightily impressive figure. What we are also doing as part of our digitised solution, and this is very, very specific to Wales. So we are very young in Wales as an organisation. We only have 5 members on board, 4 councils and a health board currently. But what we have developed within the dashboard is a reporting function that allows all organisations in financial terms to report against each one of the well-being and future generation goals that Luke was talking about earlier. So there you can see all of the goals set out, and in pounds and pence on a project level or a contract level or a departmental level or a company level, you can report how you're doing to the Wellbeing and Future Generations Office, which is absolutely key. And again, on a Welsh Government perspective, ministerial requirements from a KPI perspective, these are also some of the KPI figures that we can report back to as part of our offering. So how does it really work from a social value perspective? How is it applied and how is it measured? Well, just to give you an example of how it works within some of the Welsh public sector organisations currently, social value generally, and I say generally because not all organisations embed it across all of their activities, but generally embed the process across all goods, work, services and capital projects. The key considerations within the measurement framework is understanding what the threshold of the ITT should be. So our advice is any contract over £100,000. We can do lower, but that's our advice. And then the second part is understanding the weighting that you would put on the ITT for social value versus price and quality. Just to give you some flavours there, Cardiff are doing 20%, and there's a variety of different figures across the board. And generally, the figure gets higher with maturity and understanding of the application of social value. Interestingly now also, may not be as relevant to you, certain leading public bodies are putting that through their planning and development process as well. So how it actually works, Luke mentioned the 7 goals of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. We've mapped the goals against the 7 themes. For every single theme within the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, there will be a number of outcomes. For every single outcome within the TOMS framework, there will be a set of measures. Now, I'll pause at this point. There are a number of measures within the national TOMS framework. Certainly what I would be keen to do as an organisation is support the food sector in Wales to see how we can get further measures into the framework that are far more specific to the food sector in Wales. And what we would need if we decide to go down that route, and if there is appetite, pardon the pun, is for a number of people to stick their hands up and support us on exactly what those measurements would look like. So for every outcome and measure that maps back to the themes, going back to this, you will get a unit and a proxy value, and that proxy value is localized. And what that does do, it gives us the opportunity to deliver a total sum of social value against each one of those measurements, which is how we can give a financial figure in pounds and pence against all activities. So in Wales, there are 40 core measures and a number of different outcomes and themes, as you can see. These are mapped against each other. The most important point for me to make here is that although there are a number of measures, and there are additional measures in Wales on top of the ones in the core measurement framework, what's important is to make sure that you're reporting against measures that are appropriate and proportionate to you as an organisation. Because what that does, what we found that it does, it allows SMEs and smaller organisations to report against what they can do and what they can deliver in a menu list of measures. So what does the National TOMS framework in Wales do? What does it promote? Well, it promotes absolute fairness and transparency. But the key to me is a consistent and evidence-based measurement. What I would love to see across all public bodies in Wales is everyone using the TOMS framework, whether it be free or paid for. You make or buy your choices. And therefore we could see a consistent figure across Wales. However, the most important thing for me is to see that organisations understand and deliver on their social value obligations. I'd go on to one of the points here towards the end of this particular slide. I think what's really key that we can work towards and develop within this food sector is looking at the benchmarking. How can we look at the categories of spend within the sector, and how does that also move forward to improve what I said at the beginning, the impact on certainly health and patient outcomes. I do believe there's a way that we can tie all the activity that we're doing with the health sector with the food sector to ensure that we are harnessing the power of one, supply chains, but also the delivery of social value in Wales. And that is it for me. I'll just stop sharing that screen. Diolch yn fawr.
Chris, diolch yn fawr am hwnna. Thank you very, very much for that. It's a really fascinating overview of the TOMS approach and the value that can add. So I'll tell you what we'll do now just quickly then. There are a few questions in the chat, Bruce. If you just take a moment, we'll go through some of those, if that's okay. So if we just start with the first, some of them are observations, some of them are actual questions, so we'll go through there. So if I just take the comment from Peter Evans first, he's just asking, is there sufficient scope to allow for varying costs and quality equation when applications have been put in?
Yes, no, absolutely. There's a huge amount of scope, and certainly within the TOMS framework, you know, the objective is to work with both buyers and suppliers to maximise the scope within that particular framework and within the measurements. So absolutely, yes.
Thank you. And then a comment from Jackie regarding Welsh Government being involved in the National Social Value Task Force. There's plenty written about that on the web. It was established in 2016. I'm just having a quick look at that now. So yeah, I think the suggestion there potentially to establish a working group for food, I think that's probably is a good idea. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think on a wider context, the task force is now considerable in size. And it needed to be to start embedding the TOMS framework into Wales. I think where we're at as an evolution, if you like, is now we should start looking at specific sectors and breakout groups, if you like, to start focusing on key areas that are important, one within food, one within health, social care, whatever it needs to be, to ensure that we are, and I think the key thing for me here is being relevant to Wales.
Yeah.
That's absolutely key.
And I think really that relevance is a critical word in all this, relevance to the food manufacturers as well, because, you know, we want to create something that it works and it sort of is relatively straightforward to navigate. So we'll carry on just looking at some of these questions. So Peter's asked another question. Are we aware of an economic model that is broadly accepted that puts social value, a social value price on import substitution?
No, is my answer to that. I am not aware. However, again, this is something I believe that could come out of. So let's take one step back. What we do is we are experienced in delivering social value measurement, reporting and management, absolutely without a shadow of a doubt. What we're not is experts in the food sector, and we have not worked with that many organisations within the food sector to date. Therefore, I think we would be reliant on that expertise to help drive where we are. And I'll give you a quick example. We're currently working with probably 4 health boards, 1 in Wales and 3 in England currently. What's key is we are not health experts within Social Value Portal. Therefore, we are putting a health task force in place to start driving that activity. Hey, why don't we do that for the food sector?
Yeah, I think that makes very, very good sense, actually. Okay, let's carry on with looking at some of the questions so as we can keep the time. So I think Jackie makes a comment that the TOMS toolkit is free. So again, it's a useful website to have a look at that. And then Welsh Government considering to provide a standard approach to help buyers. I think anything that helps with consistency has got to be a good thing. So thank you for that. Now, Hugh Griffiths has put in the chat there, is there likely to be food sector specific measures in the TOMS in the near future, or are you looking to develop, adapt current measures such as local spend?
There is an appetite to look at measures specifically for the food sector. Timeframes I haven't got. Simply what we would need to do, and I'm probably repeating myself, is there needs to be a number of people to stick their hands up within the food sector in Wales and say, right, how can we do this? And therefore we would then need to take that on board to see how we can put that into the TOMS measurement framework. What I would say is the TOMS framework and measurement activity is updated annually, and it tends to coincide with the National Social Value for Wales Conference, which is November every year, which everyone is invited to, a free to attend event. Therefore, where are we? We're knocking on May's door today. Therefore, we have a window of time maybe to get a working group together to start looking at the food sector potentially to have a view of maybe launching something in November.
Sounds really
There's an opportunity there.
Yeah, there is, isn't there? Okay, I'm just conscious of time, so I'll wrap up the questions. 2 more questions, and then if we've missed any, the team will respond via email if we've missed any. So we've got to try and keep time. But I appreciate Aviona's comment regarding an opportunity for case studies for a county and set up a pilot. I think anything that we can do to demonstrate that this is achievable and show that Welsh firms are winning business has got to be a good thing to share that learning. So yeah, definitely. Alison, no issue with Larder presenting to the Food and Drink Industry Board, and perhaps we can perhaps arrange there for Chris to join that endeavour as well. And obviously, yes, if you're specifically looking at the food sector. Okay, Chris, diolch yn fawr, thank you very much, and thank you for those of you who put some questions in the chat there. It really helps bounce things along. So today's final presentation will be from Greg Parsons, who will share an example of social value and the positive outcomes that it can create. Greg's 30-year career in food and drink industry includes Whitbread, Unilever, Dairy Crest, and lastly was a founding member of the Somerset Larder, the food and drink hub created to service Hinkley Point nuclear plant. Greg is now working with Mentor Moon on the Moon Larder project and is looking at equality of provision within public procurement and the creation of opportunities for food and drink businesses within Wales. So, Greg, if I can hand over to you, that would be...
Thank you, Martin, and Bordar. Good morning, everyone. And yeah, I just really want to use this short presentation to emphasise how committed Welsh Government are to using social value to create positive outcomes and how social value will be embedded in future procurement decisions. And, the objective of today is to really stimulate the food sector. I think what Brice has presented and spoken about there, we're doing that. And obviously, from here, it's what we do next to an extent. But I'm just going to give some background to some of the things that demonstrate the level of commitment. So yeah, just social value is not a new thing, as we've learned. The Social Value Act of 2012 has been kicking around for a while, but until now, really, there's been limited compliance and there's been an focus on it, and there's been no real clear means of measurement. But obviously, as we've seen in the previous presentations, by adopting TOMS in Wales, that we can not only measure the positive impacts going forward on the communities through social value today, but we can also make sure that we maximise well-being through spending in the future. So just the National TOMS Wales have set out a clear procurement objectives to embed social value in procurement and contract decisions and to quantify it through using the TOMS. These are long-term objectives, but they've already started, and it's time for everyone in the supply chain to understand and embrace the principles and measurements that make the most of this opportunity, particularly in the food and drink sector. As Peter referred to, you know, we're in a busy sector, and actually social value could be deemed to be another thing to do, but actually we're already doing it on a daily basis, and what we need to do is surface it, because it will help us to be more competitive when it comes to public sector procurement. Sophie Howe, Future Generations Commissioner, is determined to increase the focus on social value in buying decisions, and the Future Generations Report 2020 recognises the need for measuring social value and sees more responsible procurement as a strategic lever for change. So this is getting a level of profile and a level of attention that's never happened before. And in partnership with the Social Value Portal, I've got to say, you know, from my experience, that Wales seems to be a step ahead of everybody else, and there's a real momentum and motivation to embed this into how food is bought for the public sector. And here's a roadmap that will lead the necessary changes. You know, we hope events such as this today will serve some purpose in helping to raise the awareness and encourage participation and promote collaboration between buyers and sellers, with local authorities, Welsh Government, and of course with the Social Value Portal. You know, we'd like to probably see more producers and suppliers coming on board to events like today's, and obviously we're recording the events so people can come back to it, but I think we really need to convince everyone that it is for everyone, and collectively really it's in our hands to make the difference today, tomorrow, and into the future. I just thought it'd be quite nice to share some insights and just emphasise the commitment to change with some words from Richard Dooner, who's a procurement lead for the Welsh Local Government Authority. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope that this plays for you. You might need to turn your volumes up a little bit.
Hello, my name is Richard Dooner. I'm the lead officer at the WLGA for procurement, and I'm working with heads of procurement in local government to help deliver procurement reform. Part of our programme is a product called the TOMS. TOMS stands for Themes, Outcomes and Measures. It refers to a set of proxy values that can be used in tendering processes to better understand value and to better measure the social value that is provided by one provider when compared to another. The TOMS were developed in England by the Local Government Association and have been adopted here and mapped across to the Wellbeing Future Generations Act goals. In that way they can help local authorities to report their progress against those goals. They can also report against local policy and help local authorities to understand how well they're delivering against those policy. And a practical example of that would be local employment. As a measure of local employment, every local job that is created by a tender is measured at a value of £28,500 for Wales. That value can very quickly make a difference to the total value of a tender, and it helps when you're comparing bids. Importantly, this isn't about specifying social value outcomes and then paying for them. A lot of this is about signalling to providers what the policy outcomes that the local authority requires are. It means that those providers that better match those policy outcomes in their delivery win the business. It also signals what those policy requirements are, and it signals them in very clear terms that tenderers can understand. The application of the TOMS is intended to help support recovery, but it's also intended to support policies of local authorities here, such as carbon reduction and fairer employment. Put simply, the TOMS help procurement to work better, and it leverages the public spend towards delivering policy. It fits particularly well in the political landscape of Wales at the moment, which is very ambitious. It also helps us to do, as procurement professionals, more than just drive a good deal. A good deal is what is still expected. We can't afford to spend more. We simply don't have the money. but it does mean that when providers offer better social value, or in fact a better, more rounded offer that suits the requirements of the authority, that we can measure it, account for it, and report upon it. That was a very quick overview of the TOMs. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so just finally for me, hopefully, this emphasises the commitment and the level of support that is behind the rollout of social value across Wales. And just a reminder, as Martin touched on, that Larder, we judge ourselves, or we measure ourselves as being the facilitators, and bringing to light things such as this will help to open up public sector procurement to a wider group of small and medium-sized food and drink producers. And just want to touch on what we presented at the last event, and we've now included in there a specific objective as we move forward to work with the social value portal team to support suppliers with TOMs development and to reshape these TOMs to make sure that they're more accessible and appropriate for the food sector. But also, I think it was mentioned in the chat that we have a number of pilots that we're looking to restart post-COVID, but we will include social value case studies as part of that project as well. So yeah, I mean, that was all I really wanted to cover today. I think that the importance is to spread the word and build the confidence and make sure that we get as many people participating in this great opportunity as possible. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you for that, Greg. Yeah, really useful overview there for us as well. So I'm just checking the chat. I think we've covered off the questions. There are no more in there at the moment. If anyone's got any final ones they want to add in, then do that now, and I'll come to them just before we close. So we're due to finish at 11 in any case. So yeah, certainly from our side as Larder, we're hopefully these 1 hour sessions are useful. I think they are, because they're sort of they provide a bit of food for thought, and they're quite well, the feedback we've had is that they're quite convenient people to attend for 1 hour, and it moves through quite swiftly. So hopefully just pulling it together now, really we've got the an overview there of the Future Generations Act from Luke, which I think is useful, and it sort of sets the scene as to how we can, as Wales, work towards supporting with the delivery of the aspirations of that act through localized actions and individual actions from our own businesses and companies. And again, Prius has spelt out some of the merits of being aware of social value and how that, if you're going forward, will become increasingly important. And obviously using the TOM score as well. So again, I think for us, we'll start to close there really a little bit earlier. But what I would say is that if anybody going forward now, really it's a call to action really from the Larder. If anyone wants any further information, then please do get in touch with the team. You can do that through our website, which is www.larder.wales, or contact Myrddin and Greg in the first instance. But yeah, we hope it's given you some food for thought, and that just leaves me to thank Greg, Prius and Luke for their time today in preparing the presentations. I think they'll be well received, and some of the comments in the chat endorse that as well. So thank you, and thank you for the team at Mentor Morn for the work in the background in preparing us for today. So if there are no more questions in the chat, I think we'll call it there, and we'll finish slightly early, but on time. So thank you all for attending. One last thing from me: if you have people that are interested in this, please share the word, and hopefully we can gather some further momentum around this, about the working groups in different areas, and keep it moving forward, so as we can open up those opportunities for Welsh businesses. Lovely. Diolch pawb. Have a good day. Thank you very much.